Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you all for having me today. It's fun to be on this side of the camera, I guess, instead of watching all the time. As Cynthia offered, I do spend much of my time in pursuit of all things roses, conveniently living in Portland, the Rose City. I want to reiterate just a little bit of my background. I did fall in love with Portland and the Pacific Northwest, having moved here from Alaska over 20 years ago and retiring from a 30-year career with the Forest Service, working as a forester on behalf of your national forests. And that although my academic training was in forestry, I now pursue my love of horticulture and roses, spending over 15 years volunteering at two of Portland's public gardens, Peninsula Park Rose Garden, which looks familiar there, I hope, and the Washington Park International Rose Test Garden. As Cynthia said, I joined hundreds of volunteers maintaining all of these public gardens, deadheading, leading tours, advocating for these very special places. I also spend my time, much of my time, as a Dame of Rosaria in the Royal Rosarians, being an ambassador of goodwill and serving the greater Portland community. And this year I have the opportunity, added opportunity to spread my rose passion as the president of the Portland Rose Society. So today, I'd like to offer a short history of our Rose City roots, highlight our two special rose gardens, and provide an overview about rose varieties, their growth and care, and tempt you with some new introductions and award winners. Portland's history of roses runs long, and since 1912, the Royal Rosarians have proudly proclaimed the rose to be the queen of flowers and Portland to be the rose capital of the world. Pictured here is the rose Oh My, the Royal Rosarians' centennial rose. But how did it all start? How did the rose come to Oregon? The rose first came to Oregon via a sailing ship in 1837 from the East Coast, having navigated around the South American Horn, up the west coast of the Americas, up the Columbia River and the Willamette River to a mission in an area near Champoeg, just south of Portland. It was known as the Mission Rose, and pioneer women took cuttings to grow in their own gardens. Rhonda Ann Burton, the mother of Georgiana Pittock, was one of these early pioneer women who brought roses in her covered wagons. Georgiana herself loved roses and began to host small competitions to see who had the best rose. In 1889, Georgiana and her friends formed the Portland Rose Society. It is the oldest rose society in the world. That year, they held their first rose show, and over 135 years later, the Spring Rose Show during the Rose Festival is still held annually in June, attracting the largest display of roses in the country. Portland secured its affiliation with roses with the hosting of the 1905 Lewis and Clark exhibition. Thousands visited the city, and along an 11-mile parade route and all over the city, 50,000 roses were planted. Roses were growing everywhere and adorning everything, including hats and vehicles. Portland was becoming known as the City of Roses. The mayor at the time, Harry Lane, suggested a rose carnival to attract visitors to Portland, and in 1907, the first Rose Festival was held. Each year, we celebrate all things roses with parades and events, dragon boat races, concerts, a large waterfront carnival, and other events. Portland's Royal Rosarians were formed in 1912 to manage the pageantry and spectacle of the Rose Festival. Georgiana Pittock's husband, Henry, who's pictured here in the white beard, he was the publisher of the Oregonian newspaper, and with his business friends capitalized on the rose trend and created the Royal Rosarians after the government structure of King Henry VII, who came to the throne after England's horrific 30-year War of the Roses. This all-volunteer organization serves as the official ambassadors and greeters to ambassadors of goodwill and official greeters to the city of Portland. For over 100 years, we have worn a distinctive white suit and straw hat. We doff our hats and welcome visitors to the City of Roses. As Cynthia mentioned, I've been honored to be a Royal Rosarian since 2012 and was knighted under the Rose Love and Peace. I've joined my fellow Rosarians representing Portland around the country and internationally by participating in parades and planting ceremonial recognition roses. Wherever we go, we share our motto, "For you, a rose in Portland grows." All Rosarians are knighted into membership by the Queen of Rosaria. And since 1908, the realm of Rosaria has had a queen who is crowned each year during the Rose Festival. The queen now comes from a group of 15 princesses representing the high schools of the Portland metro area. Her responsibilities include representing Portland in travels around the Pacific Northwest and internationally to Portland's sister cities like Guadalajara, Mexico, and Kaohsiung, Taiwan. Even during the COVID-19 shutdown years, the annual Queen's coronation was held. I had the honor of serving as the 2020 Prime Minister and crowned Queen Anya of Lincoln High School. On the Sunday following the Rose Festival's Grand Floral Parade, the Queen always leads a procession to the International Rose Test Garden's Queen's Walk, where she places her plaque in the center patio. All the past queens have their year's reign showcased along the walkway with their individual plaques and their names written in their own hands. It is a marvelous place to visit in the Rose Garden. And now let's talk about roses and our two famous and favorite public rose gardens. Peninsula Park is Portland's oldest public rose garden, opened in 1913. It is a little over 2 acres with around 5,000 rose bushes. And uniquely, it is a sunken area with the garden laid out symmetrically in a classic formal French style. Oops, let's not go there quite yet. Thousands visit this hidden gem of North Portland. Then there's Portland's famous garden, the International Rose Test Garden. It's located in Washington Park, up the hill from downtown Portland. It was established in 1917, is now 6.5 acres in size, has over 10,000 rose bushes and 600 varieties of roses. The garden receives over 700,000 visitors annually, and that's primarily when the roses are blooming from mid-May to early November. Staff from Portland's Park and Recreation are joined by hundreds of volunteers in maintaining the gardens. I serve as the president of the Friends of the International Rose Test Garden, which we are now a 501c3 nonprofit promoting and advocating for the garden. So let's walk through a year in the garden, starting in the fall. Each November, in fact, just last week in Washington Park, we make a fall pruning by taking all the rose bushes down to waist height, putting the gardens to bed for the winter. This fall pruning does prevent damage from winter winds, but especially removes a significant amount of material, easing the task when spring pruning is to be taken on. Roses do not go dormant and still can produce blooms well into the winter. The fall pruning at the public rose gardens is more of an aesthetic treatment. At home gardens, if you have any canes that are bearing rose bush buds, let them bloom, keep them as long as you can, and perhaps a fall pruning or a waist-high pruning would be a nice way to kind of clean up your garden in the end. As we have especially experienced in the past few years, winters in Portland do have periods of snow and ice, and it's hard to see your favorite areas transform from their blooming glory to winter slumber. But as spring comes on, we take on our primary spring pruning. President's Day weekend provides a reminder date for the Pacific Northwest, as it's likely past time of a threat of a hard freeze. The past 2 years have proved us a bit different on that. We've all faced a late snow and a hard freeze, but roses are resilient. There were very few bushes lost, and any damage that is evident that comes on in the season just needs to be pruned off as the season progresses. Spring pruning is the most important rose care step of the year. The bushes are cut down to about 2 foot high, leaving only the large canes. I'll cover this more a little bit later, but after the spring prune, In the rose gardens, they look kind of like a graveyard. Each year we wonder, will the roses really return? But sure enough, they do. Once the roses start blooming, then we focus all our energies on deadheading, or pruning off the spent flowers to stop the plant from growing rose hips, the seed pods of the rose. Deadheading is a simple process of cutting just above a leaf joint, and in a matter of weeks, a new stem or cane is growing and eventually breaking new buds and then blooms. Bags and bags of cuttings are taken out of the garden and are composted by the city and then reapplied in the rose gardens and other parks across the city. Another service provided to the thousands of visitors at the International Rose Test Garden are free daily public tours given by OSU Master Gardeners. Hundreds of guests enjoy receiving rose care instructions, learning about the history of Portland, and understanding the testing program. These free tours are offered daily from Memorial Day to Labor Day weekend, each day at 1 o'clock. Testing is primarily conducted in one central section of the garden. The International Rose Test Garden is one of 11 gardens in the U.S. where new varieties are planted and evaluated for 2 years. The American Rose Society serves as the proctor, aggregating the ratings from across the country, and annually awards the best of each variety. We all eagerly await the results, as these roses have performed exceptionally across the country in many growing conditions. One unique area of the Rose Garden is the LaBar Shakespeare Club Garden, dedicated in 1946, where plantings named for Shakespearean works and characters were planted. But as the trees have grown tall, the garden has now been planted in shade-tolerant greenery. It serves as a resting place and refuge from the riot of color and roses in the rest of the garden. One special specimen in the Washington Park Rose Garden is our 1,000-year-old rose, the Rosa canina. Mayor Katz received a cutting of the parent rose, which grows alongside currently a cathedral in Hildesheim, Germany. Its age is recorded in the cathedral records, and it has its own website. It is an old rose, or dog rose, or a common briar rose. It blooms once a year with a simple 5-petal flower of light pink. After the bloom and the petals fall away, the rose produces large rose hips. It is speculated that this rose was used to minister to the community, with the rose hips used medicinally. We now know those hips are filled with antioxidants and vitamin C, made into all kinds of different rose products. In the International Rose Test Garden, the Rosa canina is located outside the rose garden proper, next to the rose garden patio store. You can see it just on the left there above the young lady in an orange shirt. It's an extraordinarily vigorous plant and needs plenty of room. We don't deadhead it per se, rather it's taken down almost to the ground every 5 years or so, bouncing back with renewed vigor each time. The Rosa canina has a wonderful cultural history, but it also has a significant horticultural history as an old rose. Old in the rose cultivation world is before 1867. The modern roses we enjoy today were developed as hybrids from crossing these old or briar roses style with the tender teas and China roses. The old roses were hardy and could withstand harsh winters, but the teas and the China roses were ever blooming, multicolored, however too tender for locations with any seasonal swings. The hybrid cross became known as the hybrid tea, typically growing one large bloom to a stem or a cane. It's the quintessential rose when you get 24 long stem roses. Pictured here is one of the first hybrid teas called La France, created in 1867. And then there's the most popular rose even today, Mr. Lincoln. The hybrid tea rose bush can grow quite tall and predictably always wins the coveted Queen Award in those rose shows. The family of modern roses were then expanded to include the Floribunda and Grandiflora rose. The Floribunda style grows with an abundance of flora on one stem, a bouquet available with just one cut. They are shorter in stature relative to the hybrid tea. The Grandiflora has characteristics of both a hybrid tea and a Floribunda, growing very tall with multiple blooms per cane. One of the most famous Grandifloras is Queen Elizabeth. 2 full beds are planted in the Rose Garden in Washington Park next to the current Queen of Rosaria's plaque on the Queen's Walk. Other categories becoming so very popular today are identified as shrub roses or ground cover roses. They are low to the ground and do not need that much attention to have a repeat bloom. They aren't the best cut flower, but make a fabulous show in the garden. Shrub roses do not need the intense spring pruning and rather should be generally cut back and shaped. Then there's a favorite of almost everyone, English roses that are marvelous, distinctive with a flat-faced bloom and always extremely fragrant. They are almost exclusively bred by David Austin. And of course, there are climbers, a vigorous plant that needs to be trained to encourage blooms along the entire cane. A lot of extra work, but worth the effort. The optimum time for planting new roses is in the early spring. As master gardeners say about any new planting, choose the right place for the right plant. Roses need a site that will receive at least 6 hours of sun a day. Additionally, roses need spacing of 2 to 3 foot between plants to allow air circulation and easier access for care. Bare root stock is available in the spring and is the preferred style to plant. Roses like to be planted deep with the graft or crown below soil level. Don't augment the planting hole soil with any additives. Top dress the planting with compost mulch, and then be sure to water them in well. And once established, roses like to receive at least 1 inch or 2 of water a week, best offered as a deep soak. Water from below to minimize splash. And then back to pruning. Pruning is the greatest gift to roses. President's Day weekend has long been the reminder date. However, lately the best indicator is to prune when the forsythias bloom a little later. So again, spring pruning is the critical step of taking all the canes down to 12 to 18 inches, leaving all the healthy canes larger than a pencil. Remove any damaged canes and any crossing or tightly parallel canes, aiming to clear out the middle of the rose bush. Regardless of the severity of winter conditions across the country, all roses need a spring pruning for a fresh start in the season ahead. In the chat for this virtual offering, I have the Portland Rose Society's excellent 2-page pruning guide and hope you will all be able to review it. PRS also offers 9 pruning clinics in February and March at various nurseries around town. Plan to attend one if you can. Then we get into my favorite season, and that's the rose bloom season, what it's all been worth it for. It comes along, we deadhead the roses to encourage the repeat growth and blooms. Deadheading works on all plants, but with roses, pruning will gift you with repeat blooms far into the fall and maybe even early winter. Roses really benefit from fertilization. After the canes begin showing about 5 inches of new growth, you top dress the rose with slow release nitrogen fertilizer. A 5-10-10 ratio would be good. Many rose growers add another round of fertilization after the first bloom flush around July 4th. Some use alfalfa pellets, which are also a popular addition, offering organic nitrogen fertilizer. And of course, a soil test is always recommended to see what nutrients are needed. The Portland Rose Society offers an award-winning fertilizer mix available at a reasonable price. Contact them from their webpage or attend a membership meeting to purchase a bag. And as we know, nutrient availability is profoundly affected by soil acidity. Even with sufficient nutrients, if the soil pH is out of range, nutrients are not readily taken up. by the plants. If an application of garden lime is recommended in the fall. Insects and disease can be challenging to rose growing. Give your roses the best chance by locating them where they'll get 6 hours or more of sun and have some room for air circulation. Choose roses that have been bred for disease resistance, which is all of the most recent entries. Use insecticides or fungicides very sparingly and when evident of an issue. Obviously, bees and other beneficial insects are not an issue. Whatever products you do use, be sure to read and follow the label's instructions. Contact our state master gardeners or Rose Society for local advice on how to answer your questions about rose issues. For insects, it's best to monitor your roses, especially in the spring. When you see a cluster of aphids feeding on the buds, gently spray them off with a water hose. Or my preference is to run my fingers up the bud, squishing their soft bodies. If they get knocked to the ground, they'll be eaten. For fungal diseases, some preventative treatment is recommended. Again, especially in the spring, right after your spring pruning in February. Spray the rose bush every week or two with one of the general all-purpose fungicides, following the safety instructions carefully. And consider a cold pressed neem oil soak as a less toxic alternative. Roses can all live with some fungal disease and insect damage. Even with the best IPM practices and treatments, we can never expect to eliminate it from our gardens. However, monitoring and treatment is advised, especially in the early spring, and certainly worth the effort. I hope you all have some roses in your gardens or are inspired to add a rose or two or three. Roses are the queen of flowers and bestow their beauty time and time again. How can you choose an additional rose with so many beautiful ones available? Last year's Rose Festival rose, Time to Shine, is now available with its commercial name, Living the Dream. We're all awaiting what the 2026 Rose Festival rose will be. Other recent award-winning roses to tempt you are in the Washington Park Rose Garden's Gold Medal Garden. And these winners, the gold medal winners, since 1919, the Portland Rose Society has judged roses grown only in Portland over a 5-year period. Awardees of this award have a permanent home in the International Rose Test Garden's Gold Medal Garden. Burst of Joy was the 23 recipient, and Tequila Supreme just received last year's 2024 award. And Portland's Best Rose is an annual People's Choice Award offered to hundreds of visitors in the garden in late June. This year's winner was All Dressed Up, and last year, one of my favorites, Make Me Blush. We'll be advertising the 2026 voting day in June for a June day. I hope that some of you might join in those votings. It's whomever's in the garden on the day of, you grab a ballot and off you go, searching through about 24 roses. In conclusion, I would recommend an excellent 2-page summary available from OSU on caring for roses. It should also be in the chat section of our virtual session. Also included in there, in that chat section is an excellent publication on the International Rose Test Garden. And please consider supporting our Portland Rose Society by becoming a member. I think you'll find it's really worth your small investment. I'd like to thank you for attending this evening, and I hope I've inspired you to pursue adding some new gardens to your new roses to your own garden, as well as celebrating our rose history legacy by participating in our annual Rose Festival celebration in June. I'm happy to answer a few questions if there are any. Cynthia?
I'm coming. I'm sorry. I had a problem with my screen here. There, here I am. We did have a question that came in. via email, and so I'm going to start with that. And the question is, are any roses really shade tolerant? And if so, could you name some of them?
Uh, Most of the current modern roses really need some sunshine. However, I came down from Alaska, in Southeast Alaska, which rains and is generally clouded quite a bit, but a lot of trees. The older style roses, they're modern roses, but they're called rugosa roses, are excellent options for shade. They can tolerate shade and rain and bloom throughout the year, but they aren't exactly exhibition roses, but they certainly are a nice option for a shady garden.
Okay, thank you. I am having some problems getting the Q&A up to look at the questions. Shuju, can you read a question while I try to get that fixed?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So the first question, what do you do with the 1,000-year-old rose material after it is cut to the ground? Do people ever propagate cuttings?
Well, we compost it. There is a $500 fine for taking any material out of the rose garden, so it's not that we give it away per se. I would frankly not grow that rose in your garden if you have a normal property. It is a monster and it's a monster. It can be propagated. If you are a volunteer at the Rose Garden in our fall pruning, which we did last week, that is the one perk, is that you can bring some material out and start a propagation if you choose to. That can always be made happen, but I would caution anyone of growing the Rosa canina because it's a monster, and certainly any of the typical city lots in Portland would have a hard time accommodating it to the expense of everything else.
Wonderful. I've got the screen back, Shuju. Thank you. Um, do you have tips for propagating hybrid tea roses?
Yes, sure. Very easy to do, actually. Take about 7 leaf joints and take off the top, give it a strong angle cut, pop it in some rooting compound or powder or liquid. Um, I use solo cups or best like a Starbucks cup or any drinking cup that's clear, plastic cup, put holes in the bottom, get your seed starter mix. Don't use potting soil because you don't want the organic material in there. Get it as wet to be able to squish the water out. Cut that cutting at a harsh angle, and then dip it in your rooting compound. In it goes into the soil. Bag the whole thing if you don't have a grow light or a big dome thing, but you bag the whole thing, turning it into a little terrarium, put it by a window to make sure it gets some good light, and watch those roots grow. It can take about 3 weeks. So keep it bagged. You don't need, as long as you start that potting or the seed soil with a lot of water in it, but not just pouring out of it. It needs to be nice and wet. In 3 weeks, you should have some roots, and then you just start bringing it up to bigger pots.
Wonderful. That sounds
Mhm.
like a fairly simple process.
I wouldn't do that right in the middle of winter.
No.
Right now is a great time to do it while you're doing your fall pruning or just, cleaning up the garden.
Great. Could you please talk a little about identifying whether one has a rambler versus a large overgrown shrub rose?
Mm.
I inherited some extremely large and tall bushes, and I'm not sure how to prune.
A rambler rose, which, if you recall, when I was showing pictures of people in the garden, there is one rambler in the rose garden that is very famous, Dorothy Perkins, and it's might be one of the most photographed spots in the garden. They are 3 arches of pink cascading flowers. A rambler is a climbing variety, and It only blooms one time a year. So you'd think, why bother with one bloom a year, except it lasts about a month. So it's
Wow.
worth it from that standpoint. And very successfully grows up at the Rose Garden. And as I said, always has wedding pictures, other folks' family portraits being done under the arches. But I thought the question said a large overgrown shrub rose.
Mm-hmm.
So shrub in the true variety stand never gets over 2-3 foot, or really 2 foot. But what I try to talk to people in the pruning demos and right now is, most often, to create a spring prune or bring a rose down to under control, you start with this monstrous bush right now. And a lot of the canes are up at 8 foot right now because the cooler weathers, they're just shooting up, and they don't necessarily have a lot of blooms, but the best way to approach it is, especially in the spring, is take the entire bush down to your desired height and just nail it. Don't nickel dime it at that point. It will be too overwhelming. So if there's a large bushy rose that this person is dealing with right now, I would have them take it to waist height, just clean it across the top, and then in the spring deal with a shorter cut to 2 foot, and then slowly start taking out the dead damaged material, this material that is smaller than a pencil. It's quite an effort to get it to that diagram that I showed you, but especially when you're starting with a 6 foot tall bush. But it can be done without thinking about it. Start bringing it down and then getting in there. Again, this Rose Society 2-page pruning guide is excellent in describing that process.
Wonderful. Do you leave rose hips on the bushes for winter interest?
Sometimes. I not necessarily at home too much. I'll miss one here and there. What I love to do at the fall pruning at the Washington Park Rose Garden is to specifically grab some hips, because they make such a beautiful arrangement element in your Thanksgiving Day tables.
Love that idea. Do you have opinions on Monterey Complete Disease Control for black spot?
I assume Monterey is a brand.
I'm guessing so.
I don't know it, and I am fairly familiar with that. At Portland Rose Society's website, there is a whole section on rose disease and treatments that you could see the different recommended types. But I'm
Great.
afraid I don't know that off the top of my head, that variety.
Yep. Recommendations on pruning and training climbers?
Yes, climbers. Climbers are
Any
as I say,
climber is hard to control, isn't it?
they are a labor of love. Again,
Yeah.
a 2-page pruning guide has a good statement on climbers. In the theme of royalty in the realm of Rosaria, there is a saying that for a climber, if they are honorable, knight them. If they are not, off with their head. So here's all these canes that are coming up, and to a climber is its own variety, very vigorous plant. The key to climbers is to lay them horizontally so that the growth hormone that we all know is at the top of the cane or plant, and by deadheading spurs a new growth to come out at that leaf joint. By laying the canes of a climber down or circling a telephone pole with them and tying them up, it spreads that growth hormone out and drives a new stem and bloom all along that cane. And so that's what you want. Is here you have a monster climber, and we take that on really not in the spring pruning, but around January, December, nasty conditions. All of the there's over 250 climbers in the rose garden. They are all twined attached. They are all pulled down, stripped, reattached, trying to bend them into a horizontal pattern or circular. And then all of the those that are not honorable are taken off. So in the end, you have the noble canes that are nice, solid canes that will be your future. And by certainly by February 1st, they all should be finished, pruned, and then they'll take off in the spring. And by the end of the season, the whole top will be a mess. I mean, it will just, as we've all noticed, a lot of people leave climbers be, and then they have a lot to deal with. But if you
Yes.
work hard at it, you can, I mean, it is certainly worth it, but you need the space and you need to take the effort.
Great. And a comment, native bald hip rose does great in shade. And I would
Oh, that's
also
true.
say my Nooka rose,
Yes.
quit spreading as quickly once I put it on the north side of the house.
Yeah, the Nookas really, they spread, they're at the beach a lot and they are
Mhm.
just everywhere. I love to put my eggs in to Rosa rugosas. Check those out too. But the bald hip rose is also, I think that's native to Oregon, if I recall, and is a favorite of many.
Mhm. Oh, and here's an interesting one. I have about 60 roses that I've made a garden for. I've had a hard time figuring out spacing. Do you have advice? And I'm a member of Southwest Oregon Rose Society.
Mm. Well, roses are very easy to transplant and move. So when you have a bare root rose and it's hard to conceive of it getting to be 4 by 4 or 4 by 6 foot tall and 4 foot wide. So, and many of us are a little, uh, we like to look aside from the recommended 2 to 3 foot spacing because we want to put in as many as possible. So you're
Well,
going to,
60 qualifies.
yes, at 60, if they're all established, then you probably know where your problem areas are. And if you have them too tightly packed, they're going to have some disease problems, and they're not going to be blooming as prolifically as you'd want if you really gave that plant its room. So some hard choices need to be made and moved. But if that can easily be done right now, during the summer I keep a list saying, you're going to go, you're going to move here, you're going to go up to school, and whatever other fates I have. If
And
because
off with their heads occasionally.
yeah, at some point to get the new beauties in, you're kind of willing some of them to say, maybe you just don't need to be there anymore.
Okay, boy, I can't tell you when we've had so many questions. Everybody thinks about roses. Are there any gardens that feature very fragrant roses?
I don't know of any. I should ask some of my friends. There are some private gardens that people grow English roses almost exclusively, those flat face cupped roses. They have so many petals and their canes always are not as strong as when you think of a hybrid tea, a one stem rose, really strong cane. The English roses that are by far the most fragrant as a class across the board have a lot more of a pliable cane, and the wind can blow them around and the rain can just destroy the flower with all those petals. But some people in their own gardens grow them exclusively for the fragrance. I don't know of a garden specifically that is just prevalent to or English roses or focusing only on fragrance.
I will mention there is the Portland Memory Garden,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you've been there, Kimberly, but they do focus on plants that provide interest for people with
Mhm.
memory issues, and so a lot of um, uh, traditional plants that people would remember are there, and they do focus on visual and fragrance. So that might be somewhere that
Yeah.
the person would like to try. That, I think it's at 103rd and Southeast Powell
Mm.
approximately.
And they have a very good active friends group
They
for that
do.
garden.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and we actually did a presentation there recently,
Ah.
the Master Gardeners. Okay, I have a we still have lots to go. I have a very vigorous rose that has never bloomed. I assume it is a rootstock. Would you know what it might be?
Oh, yes, I didn't talk about rootstock. So, most of our roses are grafted. The original rootstock is often like Mr. Lincoln is one of the one of the best examples is that the rootstock of Mr. Lincoln is not strong or viable, that it does not do very well in Portland. So the majority of roses that we buy are grafted onto a climber, and it's called Dr. Huey. And Dr. Huey is very strong, vigorous. A grafted desired plant is grafted onto that thing. And so you want that graft below or right at the soil level. Way too often, unfortunately, the grafted rootstock will send up canes, and you'll know it instantly because Dr. Huey is a dark red, very vigorous climber. So here you have a white rose, a hybrid tea, and all of a sudden this red rose is growing among the white roses. Those are coming from eyes on the rootstock. It happens occasionally. If you cut the rootstock shoots, you will encourage more rootstock to grow. When you can see it in a second when it happens. I think we pulled out maybe 30 roses from the rose garden up above when you immediately see these rootstocks taking over. They will take over from the desired plant. You can manage it. The best way to do it is to expose the root stock and very violently-ish take off those canes so that you are taking off the eye on the rootstock. If you cut it at the rootstock, it will grow. So you're trying to either take a small axe and take it off, or rip it off and then off you go again. That works sometimes. I have given up on a couple. I take care of a school garden that I put the rose garden or the roses in, and at some point after a couple years of trying to manage, I just say, okay, you're done. We're done, and off it goes. But when you look around town and you see these red, vigorous, big bushes going, that is a Dr. Huey that is taken over from the desired plant. Sometimes the best approach is to shovel prune that plant, meaning start over again.
Who knew roses would cause such aggression? Okay, beside pruning down roses in the fall, what about diseased foliage? I remove and clean up around the base to try to minimize any disease from overwintering. My neighbors completely exfoliate their rose bushes. My mom never did that. Today, I noticed a lot of small black spots on the underside of some leaves, a pest of some kind. Any ideas? And love roses and love the rose garden, this person says.
Wonderful. The fungal diseases are ubiquitous. You're never going to get rid of them all. And as I tried to mention, the roses can handle some black spot. They can handle some powdery mildew. They're still going to bloom. If it takes on the entire bush, the plant will start sloughing those leaves and they will not be able to photosynthesize. The bloom will drop back, et cetera, et cetera. So cleanup is great. Yard cleanup is wonderful if you could pull it off, get it taken care of. It's not going to solve the problem. I also strip my when I do the spring pruning in February, I strip all of the past leaves because they have fungus on them. And any of those leaves that you're seeing out there with the little black spots on the back are actually rust fungus that looks like rust, that color in the summer, but now is all looking like black spots. The moment you do your spring pruning is when you start some treatments, because those spores will start waking up, and they'll be there a bit anyway, and you just sort of monitor. And then by the time that the weather mellows out in June, when the nighttime temperatures are kind of climbing up higher, you're not going to get as much black spot or powdery mildew. Mostly powdery mildew comes on in the spring and black spot later. When you see black spot, I might as well pop those leaves off because they're never going to heal. The plant will slough them off themselves. When you're dealing with 100 roses in your garden, it's kind of hard to get that type of cleanup done all the time, but I applaud you if you do.
I think you pretty much answered this question. Are the rose gardens treated for black spot and aphids, or how are these pests dealt with or prevented? I think you pretty much covered that unless you have anything to add.
Well, I'd mentioned that the Peninsula Park Rose Garden is not sprayed for fungicide.
Okay.
The International Rose Test Garden is in with a commercial fungicide about once a month. We used to have a more aggressive schedule, maybe once every 2 weeks at the beginning of the season. And that's just for fungicide. We do not spray for any with any insecticides. Aphids are not a problem in either garden with that volume. There's plenty of beneficials that come by and eat them all up. We don't have Japanese beetles. Hopefully we won't forever. I get visitors from across the country that say, what about Japanese beetles? And they just cannot believe we don't have them yet. And if we did, it would not be just the end of roses, but all our I mean, it would be bad, bad, bad.
Mhm.
So hopefully that's stays away. We do have one fairly significant problem with roses and bugs, and that's the midge. A midge is a little fly that sends its little larva up to the top of the cane and eats or aborts the bud. It was most often or effectively treated with neonics, and we all know that that's not really where we want to be. And the city has offered a waiver for a granular form of neonic to be applied at the very beginning of the season on beds that I mean, there's been a whole testing process and regulate or monitoring to see that they are only, how responsive have they been and taking different approaches. But we are staying away from the neonics now. But the midge is difficult. It looks the bud is either just aborted, so you see a little brown tip on a cane, or a bent bud, or a burnt looking top. And regardless of it being midge or what we call blind shoots, you just need to activate that cane again to get flowers by pruning it down, or pruning it, like giving it to the next, where the cane is strong enough. There's a 5-leaf rule for pruning for deadheading, and that just speaks to the compound leaf of a rose has it has 3 leaflets at the top, or 1 leaflet goes all as you go down the cane. Those leaflets increase when you get to a 5-leaflet leaf, the cane should be strong enough to support the next growth and blooms. So that is just a general rule. With your eye, you can see, is that cane strong enough to support the next thing? If it's just a little whippy thing, it's not strong enough. You need to go down further on that cut and take on midge damage or bad, damage just by, or deadheading by going down to a strong sized cane.
Okay. Which rose varieties can you recommend as most naturally disease resistant?
Well, the knockout rose, which I had a picture in there, I think. The knockout rose came around in the year 2000 by a crazy hybridizer named Bill Radler. And he said he was determined to grow the most disease-resistant, maintenance-free rose possible. And he created lots of babies, poured fungus all over them. And what came through was what they wanted. And then they also they also have non-viable seed pods or seeds in their pods. So they don't need to be deadheaded just to keep blooming. The Energizer bunny of roses. And they are planted all over our freeways around here. We call them the drive-by roses. So
Ah.
they are not needing treatment. They just need a little bit of water. They do need to be knocked back in the spring to get a nice flush of new growth and such. Those are your ultimate non or anti-disease plants. However, they get very shaggy and the color palette is pretty minimal. So I like ones that you don't want to worry about too much are, I love the Drift series, Drift. I had a picture of that in there. They have lovely colors and such, stay nice and small, make a really, all the floribundas are just fabulous roses. Come up to the rose garden. If you see that OSU 10-minute university caring for roses sheet, it says it right at the top. I mean, that is the place. They're planted in mass. You say, I like that one, and I'm going to go after that one. Or see the smaller, the floribunda banks put on quite a show and might be just the kind of rose you want.
Great. I will also mention that the Peninsula Rose Garden has many of those too. I'm
Yes.
so glad you talked about that garden. I think it is an unsung beauty of North Portland.
Mhm.
Okay, I was surprised by my first visit to the rose garden that many of them lacked a floral smell. What is currently happening on developing the floral fragrance scene?
Roses take about a 10-year process to go through hybridization, testing, production, and commercial availability. We're now past, probably 15, 20 years past a class of a lot of roses, mostly hybrid teas, that were created for disease resistance and exhibition form. And in the process of making sure that disease resistance was there, they inadvertently lost the recessive gene of fragrance, and everyone had a fit. So Olympiads in there, Crimson Glory, Opening Night. These are fabulous roses that don't smell. Now all of the roses that are coming out have a fragrance. And I put up there Neil Diamond, one of our tour guides up there. She always says, okay, she does a sort of smell test between Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand, and Neil wins all the time. And it's a red, white, speckled rose. So I'm sorry your nose didn't find the fragrant roses up in the rose garden, but we're certainly trying to keep them that way. Plus, we just started, last year was our full first year, is a fragrance tour. So you can do that in a non-tech way, in that there are fragrance signs, a metal cutout fragrance sign that people go, and then right by our wooden kiosk, our information center, you can download the app that tells you what is fragrance, how is it created, and where in the garden are this fragrance tour. And I often see people following the tour to be able to smell those roses.
Good to know. Is there a way to encourage roses to get taller? I have one that says it gets up to 5 feet, but it grows to about 3 feet each season for the last 2 years.
I wonder which one it is. In Portland, my experience in roses and other plants, I assume many share this with me. Anything on that tag, you can almost count on 2 more foot.
Yes.
So that has not been my experience. I think you just have probably a floribunda or a tall shrub rose. Most of the hybrid teas all start at 4 and go on up. So if you don't like the rose, maybe you just time for another one.
If you planted a rose 4 years ago and the graft is above the ground, would it make sense to dig it up and plant more deeply?
I would not. I would, every year we should be adding compost on our gardens, and just roses and tomatoes both love to be covered up. Obviously, shrubs and trees and such, we get into all kinds of trouble that way. Just compost it up. If you're talking about, a foot above ground, it wouldn't hurt to dig it up a bit and sink it down. But generally, it should be fine. But plus, with that spring pruning approach and you're opening it up, you'll find that that old graft spot will have been replaced by new canes coming up eventually. A rose seems to grow wider in time and in its maturity because you're opening up the middle and you'll see the pattern, or it'll just start widening out. But that's all new, yummy, wonderful new canes. And at some point you need to take out the old woody stuff with a little axe. And not an axe, a little saw.
Mhm. Thank you for this very informative presentation. I've learned so much, says somebody. Next question is, do roses die of old age?
I'd say no. The roses will outlive us all. They're kind of weeds. They don't love to be in pots. I have plenty in pots, but if they're planted in the ground, and even if they aren't pruned, I mean, we prune them for our own benefit. We prune them to encourage their bloom. We give them a fresh start in the spring to encourage their bloom. But if they are left onto their own devices and get water, they'll do just fine. They're like the Rosa canina that's over 1,000 years old. Many of the many roses all over town are very, very old roses, 50 plus years.
Oh, we're down to 3. People are just intensely interested. This is wonderful. Will propagated roses not do as well because they don't have rootstock like a grafted rose?
That's a great question.
That is a wonderful
Yeah,
one.
Heirloom Roses, which is down below Wilsonville, they used to have a retail, and before COVID, they closed it down, and now it's only wholesale. So they specialize in only bare or own stock roses. And just for kicks, I've gotten a couple from them. The roses did just fine. I think I don't understand enough I know that some rootstock is really required on some of the desired plants for our Portland area. Um, so let's see, what was the question? When I propagated, and I've been playing with micro miniature roses. I grew a bunch last winter, and this year I'm doing more miniature roses, because you can't get that many of them out there in the world anymore. They're mostly specializing on the bigger roses. All of them do well on their own roots. And the ones I have gotten from Heirloom Roses have all done well. So I think you're going to be doing fine, but I have not found problems. Rich Bear, who's like one of the kings of roses in Portland, he grows so many or propagates so many roses. If you're a member of the Rose Society, you can be lucky enough to get a few every fall in what he's grown. And they all do great. So that's a good argument for why do we graft roses? I don't know.
You mentioned that Mr. Lincoln grows best in Portland metro area grafted onto another rootstock. Is that generally true for all roses here or just hybrid teas? Are there times when our own root roses work better here? I'm sorry,
No, I
that
get
was a
it.
little good. Oh, good.
I personally watched this one planting up in the rose garden struggle. It's a Mr. Lincoln, and it's just not doing well. And I think we're on the third planting of trying to make sure this thing works there. However, the big bed of Mr. Lincoln's that has about 20 roses is doing fantastic. So I guess I'm not an expert on all those that do well or don't do well on rootstock, their own rootstock. I just know Mr. Lincoln's a pretty good example, and the production of commercial offerings for roses require that. It's probably something in that as well. This is something I can look into more. But they have the rootstock, and they just slap that desired plant on, and you're not having to put the time and energy to have a full root system for that desired plant. It's probably helps the rose growers get those commercial offerings out there.
Great. We have one last written question, but I just did want to check, Shuju, sometimes you have questions, but as a panelist, and Shane as well, you can't, put your questions in the Q&A. I don't know, it's some Zoom thing. Did you have a question tonight, Shuju?
Yes, I do.
Ah, good.
So I have two roses that I have actually moved.
Mhm.
However, I left some rootstock apparently in the original locations, and I cannot get rid of the rootstocks. They keep on coming back year after year after year. Is other than just keep on digging them up, is there any way that I can just get rid of them?
Wow. I've never seen them be that stubborn. If you take your um, uh, axe kind of thing and just pop the roots, you're going to
Oh
kill it
yeah, I've
again.
taken like a reciprocating saw to
Wow.
get them out, and they come back. I mean, the first year comes back as a little thing, and I
Mhm.
may not notice it, but by the time I notice it, it's a pretty big bush again.
Well, glyphosate, I don't know. Just dip a little or, Q-tip on some of that. Sounds almost like a blackberry. I'd have to see it. It's hard to imagine that it could survive that kind of treatment, and still be that resilient. But yeah, they are kind of weeds.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Hey, Suja, did you cover for how people can get those reference materials?
Yeah, I put them up in the chat,
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I put instructions on how to download them
Great.
onto their own computers.
Wonderful.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry. Oh, Shane, did you have a question too?
well, I wanted to comment and say I have the same issue with the Nuka Rose. I
Ah,
transplanted a couple of years ago, and it just keeps coming back. So to me, it's persistence. I
Mhm.
do happen to see it often enough that if I see one coming up, I just yank it at that spot. But my question actually was, what are some edible applications of roses? I imagine rose hips are mostly used.
Yeah, rose hips are really that. We have our Rose Society membership meeting next Monday, and we have there's a holiday bazaar going on as a fundraiser, but we also have a presenter from Oregon Rain Soaps and Products, and they are one of our main distributors out of the Rose Garden store patio, or Rose Garden store on the patio there. Excuse me. And they use a lot of rose petals and oils and such to incorporate it into their fragrances, soaps, teas. uh, Oh, and some spray stuff. And anyway, edible, the only one I really know of is the hips that people use for jams and jellies and such.
great.
Thank you.
We have two last questions in our Q&A. One is the inevitable question about deer. I live a quarter mile from the rose garden, and the deer see my garden as a buffet. What does the rose garden do since there are no fences?
That is a great question because
Yeah.
I ask it. I've been up there, like I said, 15 years, and Harry Landers, the past curator, I said, Harry, I mean, clearly deer are here. Why are they not eating? He says the wildlife, the wild human life in this garden and the park at night prevent them from, they just don't come in. And in 15 years, if anyone knows the Gold Medal Garden very well, you can get to it. It's right above the Shakespeare Garden, and you can get to it from the side path. One time, late summer, right, right after COVID, 22 or something. Anyway, the Julia Child was eaten almost down to the ground. I mean, there's deer had come in. It's the only time I've seen it in over a decade. Deer think roses are candy. Uh, Fences work. Period. Some people have some success in motion sprinklers, so they come through and the motion, but it is a real battle. But for some, I don't know really why, and other than Harry's explanation that they just do not come into the rose garden and eat that, you know, tasty palette of yummies there, other than one time I've seen them do a lot of damage.
I can't help thinking it's that off with their head thing. But that's a personal guess.
Yeah.
All right. Last question, and really appreciate we had a lot of questions here tonight, and I appreciate you sticking with this, Kimberly. I have transitioned to own root only. I've even taken cuttings of my grafted roses so that I can eventually get rid of the mother plants. I find all my own root are healthier, this person says.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So not a question, just an interesting comment.
Yeah. The rose growers today are very interested in selling roses, and they know that to do that, they need to have disease-resistant roses and have them fragrant. I always find it interesting how in my garden and elsewhere, you need to know what that particular rose is. People always want to know what is the name of that rose. Not so demanding on regular plants and other things in the garden, even though we all sort of keep our inventory in our heads. So as you propagate new roses, I mean, I'd really encourage people just to kind of keep an inventory of what you have, or at least even get those little tags in the ground so you can enhance the enjoyment of your garden and all the people that walk by and enjoy it as well, by giving them a name.
Wonderful. Really appreciate your time, Kimberly. It was clearly a topic that many had lots of really interesting thoughts and questions about. And as I said at the beginning, it's just a real honor to have one of our own doing a presentation. And I will just mention that next month we're going to be talking about nature journaling with Elizabeth Higgins. I'm excited to learn more about doing that. Record keeping and journaling has not been something I've done on my garden journey, and you kind of segued into that, Kimberly, with your suggestion about labeling things for people that are walking by, and really appreciate your time for tonight.
Pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.